And police in Italy are investigating possible arson after a fire destroyed more than a dozen Tesla vehicles. Elon Musk is calling the incident at a Rome dealership terrorism. This comes as Tesla has been the target of recent protests around the world.
Imagine that one of America's most legendary companies, a symbol of reliability and industrial, might suddenly announces that it is shutting down production in its homeland. John Deere, a name synonymous with American farmers and traditional labor for decades, is breaking with tradition and changing the rules of the game. What is behind this decision? How could a company that was once a bastion of national pride now become a symbol of crisis and betrayal?
I think you're going to remember today, it's going to be a free nation that we're dealing with. We're going to have a very free and beautiful nation. It's going to be Liberation Day in America, and it's going to be a day that hopefully you're going to look back in years to come and you're going to say, you know, he was right. This has turned out to be one of the most important days in the history of our country.
Against this backdrop, a real political storm is brewing. Donald Trump, a man who has always been the voice of the American dream and a defender of jobs, changes his tone live on air from confidence to anger and despair. His words ring out like a thunderclap. John Deere has betrayed the country, and we will not let this go unpunished. But what is behind this harsh reaction? What will be the consequences of imposing tariffs of up to 200% on products manufactured abroad? And can politics stop global processes that are already out of control?
That's a 10. That's a good one.
Behind the scenes of tough negotiations and loud public statements, a real drama is unfolding, a struggle between the past and the future, between tradition and innovation, between people and machines. In recent years, John Deere has not simply cut production in the US, but has invested in technologies that until recently seemed like science fiction: autonomous tractors, artificial intelligence, and drones capable of monitoring every square meter of a field. But what does this digital revolution mean for the millions of workers whose livelihoods now depend on algorithms and software?
Ready? The higher the tariff, the more likely it is that the company will come into the United States and build a factory in the United States so it doesn't have to pay the tariff.
That will take many, as you know, that will take many years.
In fact, I'll tell you, you know, there's another theory is that the tariff, you make it so high, so horrible, so obnoxious that they'll come right away. When I do the 10%, 10% is really, first of all, 10% when you collect it is hundreds of billions of dollars. The numbers that you're talking, all reducing our deficit. But really, so there's two ways of looking at a tariff. You can do it as a money-making instrument, or you can do it as something to get the companies. Now, if you want the companies to come in.
In this video, we explore how the transition to automation has become not just a business issue, but a challenge to the very soul of America. You'll hear stories of farmers desperately trying to preserve their way of life and see how communities built around working the land are being torn apart by internal conflicts. We'll reveal why new technology is not only a step forward, but also a source of new problems: complex maintenance, dependence on dealers, and the inability to repair a tractor that is no longer just a machine, but a complex computer on wheels. But most importantly, we will show you how this conflict has become a symbol of larger changes sweeping across American industry, how large corporations are forced to choose between preserving jobs and surviving in a tough global competition.
There's been a lot of on and off, some inconsistency.
There's no inconsistency. I'm not like a block that just, I won't delay. It's called flexibility. It's not called inconsistency. It's called flexibility.
And how politics, despite loud statements and threats, is increasingly powerless in the face of rapid technological change. Are you ready to learn the truth about what is happening to one of America's most recognizable companies? Are you ready to see old symbols crumble and new rules of the game emerge? This is not just a story about John Deere and Trump. It is a story about the future of America, which is already here, even if many people do not want to admit it yet. Stay with us for the most intense moments of this incredible conflict, which will turn your understanding of what Made in America means upside down.
After Trump imposed those sweeping 25% tariffs on aluminum and steel imports, the European Union retaliating with tariffs on up to $28 billion of U.S. goods. Trump making it clear this isn't over, vowing to respond in kind with sweeping retaliatory tariffs early next month.
On that fateful day when John Deere announced the suspension of production in the United States, the whole country froze in shock. This event was not just a headline, it was a real shock to millions of Americans, especially those who for decades had associated this brand with something more than just agricultural machinery. For them, John Deere was a symbol of national pride, the embodiment of hard work and the unshakable strength of American industry. But on that day, those values were under threat. Live on television, just seconds after the company's official announcement, Donald Trump, then president and one of the most influential politicians in the country, was unable to contain his emotions. His face turned red, his voice trembled, and the words he uttered sounded harsher and more painful than ever before. He called the decision a betrayal of the national interest and promised that such actions would not go unpunished.
US President Donald Trump has announced a 25% tariff on all car and light truck imports into the country. It's due to come into effect on April 2nd. Economists and world leaders are warning that it will be a tax on consumers and have a chilling effect on the global economy. But to Americans, Trump paints a rosy picture, predicting that the levies will spur growth.
The entire country watched this moment as if it were the beginning of a new era in which familiar rules and foundations were being destroyed before their eyes. For many viewers, it seemed that it was not just a production line or a business strategy that was collapsing, but the very idea of what it means to be made in America. Trump accused John Deere's management of abandoning American workers and moving production to foreign countries for short-term gain, disregarding the consequences for the entire country. His words sounded like a challenge and a warning at the same time. "We will not let jobs leave the country without a fight," he said that day, and his voice, full of determination and anger, led many to believe that the battle was just beginning.
After weeks of whiplash, Trump threatening tariffs, imposing some and walking back others, many Americans are feeling the uncertainty. In Swisher, Iowa, distillery owner Jeff Quint says it's paralyzing.
The bourbon industry is going to be collateral damage in this tariff war. I don't really think there's any way around that.
And he's not alone. Tonight, the majority of Americans, 61%, now say they disapprove of how the president is handling tariffs. 56% say they disapprove of his handling of the economy overall. But the president has dismissed those concerns tonight, saying he has the right to change course.
However, despite the powerful words and colorful rhetoric, the situation within John Deere was much more complex and not so clear-cut. For several years, the company had been facing growing problems that forced it to rethink its previous approaches and strategies. Production costs within the US were rising rapidly. According to data provided by independent economists, by 2025, labor and logistics costs in America were almost 3 times higher than in neighboring Mexico. This figure was a real-time bomb for a large corporation whose competitiveness directly depended on the efficiency and cost of its products. It was no coincidence that secret documents leaked to the press said that the company was on the verge of collapse unless radical measures were taken. John Deere's management held closed board meetings to discuss all possible scenarios for overcoming the crisis. Among the proposals ranging from staff cuts to finding new markets and investing in technological innovation, the most significant and controversial was a plan to build a new plant in Mexico. According to insiders, this decision was made with great tension and even divided the management. Some saw it as the only way to keep the business afloat, while others feared massive reputational losses and a negative reaction from the American public. The plant in Mexico was supposed to be John Deere's economic lifeline. Labor there was about 70% cheaper than in the US, and access to the fast-growing markets of Latin America opened up new opportunities for expansion. The region's infrastructure was improving year by year thanks to government investment, and transport corridors significantly reduced delivery times. These factors made the Mexican plant not only economically viable, but also strategically important for the company's survival in the face of fierce global competition.
We begin with the president's trade war escalating tonight. This evening, the retaliation against the United States, Canada, and the European Union responding quickly, just hours after President Trump's 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum coming into the United States. Canada, the largest supplier of steel to the U.S., slapping new tariffs on $20 billion worth of U.S. goods that are sold in Canada. And the 27 countries of the European Union imposing retaliatory tariffs on up to $28 billion worth of U.S. goods sold in Europe.
However, the decision to relocate production was a real blow to American farmers and ordinary people for whom John Deere is part of their lives, part of their family history and national identity. Protests broke out across the country, with farmers openly expressing their dissatisfaction, refusing orders and calling for a boycott of the company's products. A real war of opinions broke out online, with some accusing the company of betrayal and others trying to explain the need for change in a changing world. At the political level, the situation escalated even further. Donald Trump reacted immediately to the company's statement, issuing harsh threats to impose tariffs of up to 200% on imported John Deere products. His rhetoric became a symbol of the protection of American workers and national interests, which won him support from a certain segment of the population, especially in agricultural regions. However, the administration and Congress were divided in their assessment of the possible consequences of such measures. Economists warned that excessively high tariffs could lead to higher prices for agricultural equipment, which would hurt farmers themselves and the industry as a whole.
With Elon Musk's views on weighing into very much national politics, national elections in Europe. And then on top of that, when you see the backdrop of Tesla upgrading its product line and the impact of them trying to chase more sales at the back end of last year, that means it's short on inventory. It can't necessarily sell as many vehicles or doesn't have as many in stock to sell. So there is that issue there of a confluence of impacts, which means that sales have been falling. Again, the question is how much more that will impact into February as well, given that the back end of last year in 2024, Tesla sales did slip overall.
Meanwhile, tensions were growing within the company itself. The board of directors was divided into two camps. Some insisted on the need to face economic reality and technological challenges, while others advocated keeping production in the US at any cost, fearing a loss of customer trust and loyalty. Sources reported heated debates with strong emotional arguments, even threats of management resignations. This was not just a business conflict, it was a struggle for the future, for identity, and for John Deere's place in American history. Ultimately, these first 2 points of the plan, the shock announcement and its reasons, reveal the full depth of the crisis John Deere found itself in. This story is not just about business decisions and political reactions, but about the clash between tradition and reality, the struggle between preserving the past and the need to move forward. These events were the starting point for a chain reaction that soon swept across the country and made everyone think about the future of American industry. This technological transformation exacerbated internal conflicts at John Deere. A struggle unfolded within the company between supporters of innovation and those who advocated preserving traditional methods of work. Some of the management saw automation as the only way to survive in the face of fierce global competition, while others feared that it would lead to a loss of customer trust and an exodus of buyers to more flexible and rapidly developing competitors. Meanwhile, new players were entering the market, companies unburdened by large production capacities and traditions, which could quickly adapt to changing conditions and offer lighter, more economical, and technologically advanced machines. These competitors offered farmers simpler, more affordable alternatives, quickly capturing market share and causing additional concern for John Deere. Social media was increasingly filled with stories from farmers about autonomous system failures that led to crop losses and financial losses. This added tension and undermined confidence in innovation. However, company executives insisted that such difficulties were an inevitable part of the introduction of new technologies and would bring significant benefits for both the business and its customers in the long term. These 2 points in the plan show that the conflict surrounding John Deere had become much more than just a business or political issue. It was a struggle to preserve traditions and national identity in the face of rapid change and globalization. Technological progress, which could have been a salvation, turned into a challenge for millions of people for whom technology is not just a tool, but a part of life and culture. The escalation of the conflict between the company, farmers, and politicians reflected broader processes taking place in American society and the economy and heralded further, more profound changes. The situation around John Deere continued to escalate, and soon the conflict reached a new level, becoming a symbol of deeper changes affecting American industry and society as a whole. Donald Trump, who throughout the crisis had positioned himself as a defender of traditional values and jobs, began to use the story as a political tool in his campaigns. His speeches at rallies were filled with bitterness and despair. He did not simply criticize the company, he made John Deere a symbol of the loss of American power and national dignity. During a speech in Ohio, Trump said, "They're not just taking jobs, they're ripping the heart out of America and throwing it into foreign lands." These words resonated with many, especially in regions where industry and agriculture play a key role in the economy. However, there was more to it than just political gamesmanship. Trump gradually began to lose influence on these issues. Despite loud statements and threats, the reality proved to be much more complicated. The forces behind technological change and global markets were too powerful, and the scale of change too great to be stopped by simple tariffs or political pressure. Against the backdrop of a growing number of automated farms and factories where machines were replacing people, much seemed inevitable. Political support could not change fundamental economic laws, and even the former president's personal involvement in the conflict did not bring the desired results. Significant changes were taking place within John Deere. The company officially announced the complete shutdown of all its U.S. factories, a decision that was made quickly and without prior discussion with the workers. In a live broadcast from several factories simultaneously, millions of Americans witnessed empty production lines, idle machines, and confused workers who could hardly believe what was happening. Internal documents leaked to the press described it as an inevitable step toward digitization and automation, where the role of humans is reduced, giving way to machines and software. This was not just a technical change, but a symbolic end to an era in which human labor was the foundation of manufacturing. The reaction of farmers and rural communities was violent and intense. Many felt abandoned and betrayed. The traditional tractors and combines that had been their reliable companions in everyday life for many years now seemed complex, incomprehensible, and inaccessible. With growing dependence on digital technology and the need for constant maintenance, farmers started a movement for the right to repair their own equipment. They demanded control over their machines, the ability to fix problems, and independence from dealers and manufacturers. Protests and rallies took place in several states, and legislative bodies in some regions began to consider initiatives to limit manufacturers' control over equipment. Despite criticism and protests, John Deere's management insisted that automation and digitization were necessary for survival in the face of global competition. According to them, new technologies make it possible to increase efficiency, reduce costs, and minimize human error. However, there were also more gloomy conversations behind the scenes at the company. Internal sources reported heavy emotions at meetings, with many employees crying as they discussed plans for layoffs and retraining. While some staff were offered retraining as technical specialists and drone operators, there were clearly not enough positions for everyone. At the same time, the financial markets experienced sharp fluctuations. John Deere's shares initially fell, causing panic among investors, but soon recovered partially thanks to the support of analysts who were confident of resumed by Kenfinan's long-term prospect. International competitors, especially from Europe and Asia, watched the situation with interest, ready to take advantage of any weakness of the American giant. In the US, political debates became increasingly heated, with lawmakers from agricultural regions demanding active government intervention, fearing for the future of their territories and economies. Against this backdrop, Donald Trump's career went into decline. His attempts to preserve old traditions and jobs were confronted with insurmountable changes in the economy and technology. In one of his last public appearances, he seemed to have resigned himself to the inevitable. On live television, he read a statement in which he acknowledged that he saw no way to stop the processes that had spiraled out of control. For many observers, this marked the symbolic end of an era in which politics and industry were inextricably linked. and the dawn of a time when the world would change without looking back. His voice no longer sounded angry or threatening, but carried a sense of suppressed sadness and defeat. Thus, the closure of the John Deere factories and Trump's departure from the political arena became landmark turning points for the entire country. American industry faced new challenges, not only economic and global, but also technological, which are changing the very essence of production and labor. This crisis forced a rethinking of the role of the state, business, and society in the new reality. Many experts agree that even more profound changes lie ahead, and today's leaders may find themselves playing catch-up. In the end, John Deere's decision to restructure its production was not just a business move, but a symbol of the end of one era and the beginning of another. Agriculture and industry continue to transform, and American society is trying to find its place in a rapidly changing world. The future remains open, but one thing is clear: tradition and stability are giving way to innovation and uncertainty. This story is a vivid testament to these changes and how deeply they affect the lives of millions.